Hi everyone, welcome back to my vlog. I'm Robin, or Hobbit's Reading List, and this vlog, we are reading my most avoided book. I'm gonna read Les Mis. That'll be something. I have been wanting to read Les Mis since I was probably like, I don't know, like 8. And I discovered the musical and I fell in love with it. And I saw the size of Les Mis, which my copy is 1,272 pages. Yeah, it's literally like the width of my head. So while I've always wanted to read it and better understand the story, because I think I've only ever seen Les Mis on stage once. And so while I know the soundtrack, I sometimes forget the in-between bits between the songs. So I've always wanted to read the book and really understand the story, and I just haven't because the book is so intimidating. And I didn't have the time to devote to it because I was like in school and work and all this sort of stuff. And while I'm still working, I'm in a period of time that's a little bit slower, and I'm not in school currently. I may go back next year, but I don't know. But I'd like to grad school, I mean. So this is sort of like the perfect time to read it. But I also have like a reading goal, so I don't want to like, you know, just dilly-dally with it. So I'm gonna try to read it in 2 weeks, which is gonna be really hard. Because I got like other stuff going on, right? Like I still have like a life and like hanging out with friends and hanging out with my husband and stuff like that. So I don't have all the time to devote to it, but we'll see. If it takes like slightly longer than 2 weeks, like that's fine. I kind of need that pressure to keep to myself to actually like read as much as possible. So there's that. Since I'm talking about Les Mis, I will go ahead and say that I have already started it. I have read almost 150 pages of my copy, although I am reading it on Kindle just because it's easier to hold. But at the end of the day, I'm coming up and checking where that puts me in my physical book. So, Les Miserables is the story of a bunch of people. It starts in 1815, but it goes to 1832 or 35 when the July Revolution happened, which was a 2-day revolution. I had always thought, mistakenly, that Les Mis was about the French Revolution. Nope, the French Revolution happened like 40 years before that, if not more. I don't know exactly like the start and stop. It's sort of like a carryover of the French Revolution, but it's not the same. But it is like anti-monarchy and stuff like that. What I think is really interesting is the main character that we're following is Jean Valjean, who was a prisoner for 19 years because he stole a loaf of bread. Love that logic. He stole a loaf of bread, he got 5 years, and then he tried to escape a couple times, and that like compounded his sentence. I think it's really interesting to follow Jean Valjean because he's just such an interesting character already. Like, we haven't seen like a ton of him. I've read almost 150 pages. We haven't seen a ton of him. But this will have spoilers, by the way. It's an almost 200-year-old book. So forgive me for that. It's also incredibly long. So can you imagine what me talking about it would be like 200 pages from now? Like, it'd be nothing. So I am gonna have like spoilers in this. The book starts by introducing us to the bishop, and we don't see the bishop again. We have like a solid like 90 pages with the bishop. And then I don't think he shows up again after that, which is fine. But I knew going into it that, like, I read The Count of Notre Dame, not The Count, jeez, The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Hugo. So I know what the writing style is like. He's very verbose. He describes things a lot so that you can picture them, you can put yourself in them, like, you really get a sense of, like, what he's describing. And that's the same for characters. So the bishop, we know, like, had a relatively, like, normal life, and then he got married, and then he lost his wife, and he ended up going into the church. That's a very, like, abbreviated summary because I am not Victor Hugo. He very much behaves the way that the Bible says, the way that he follows Jesus' teachings. He gives everything he can to the poor. He isn't concerned with, like, material wealth for himself. He was very simply, like, it was really nice to read, especially just the comparison of, like, the bishop with the other, like, priests and everything that he interacts with, who don't necessarily abide by that. So I thought that was interesting. But the thing that stuck out to me was when we did meet Jean Valjean, 90 pages in. It's like 4 days after he's been released from prison. And I guess prisoners were given this, like, yellow passport that marked them as, like, convicts. So there's no escaping that he came from prison. And the people in this town where the bishop lives, which I'm not going to try to pronounce a lot of the names because they're French, and I don't want to insult French people that much. Like, I can't speak your language. I'm not going to try. I'm sorry. But unless I've heard it already. Because with the Count of Monte Cristo, I think it was okay. But Jean Valjean goes to this town, and as soon as people, like, see his passport or, like, hear from someone else that he's a convict, like, they immediately, like, turn him out. Like, he's not allowed in any of the inns or anything. No one will let him, like, even just, like, rent a room. Like, he goes to just a house and is like, I have money, I will pay you if you just let me sleep and feed me. And as soon as they realize that he is the convict that everyone is talking about, they will not. And granted, part of that is because his passport says he's a very dangerous man. So, like, okay. But also, I think I'm drawing a lot of parallels to what I know about the American prison system and how released prisoners are treated once they're out. And so I was, like, reading this and it was, like, heartbreaking, especially because I know that it still happens to a lot of people, of just this, like, this sense that you will never get a typical life again. That this will always follow you, no matter what the crime was, it will always follow you. And so that was just, like, that was really upsetting to read. And then you see with Jean Valjean, like, it drives him to make these decisions that are not helpful to himself, but he feels like he doesn't have any other choice. And so he steals, he meets the bishop. Bishop lets him stay with him, feeds him, no charge. In the middle of the night, Jean Valjean steals the silver that the bishop has and leaves. But you see that it's, like, it's desperation of, like, he's already worked for someone for a day and got half of the wage that he was promised because it was discovered that he's a convict. So it's just, like, it's heartbreaking. Jean Valjean is caught and brought back to the bishop, but the bishop plays it off like these were gifts. They were gifts. You also forgot these silver candlesticks. These were also a gift. And so the bishop is a really great guy, and once the police leave because they're convinced that, like, all right, this is the bishop paying the bishop. Cool. The bishop is like, I've bought your soul for good. And I was just like, ooh, I mean, yeah. Like, Jean Valjean was shown mercy. So, anyway, I've been rambling for a while. So, okay. So there's Jean Valjean. We skip forward 2 years. We meet Fantine, who is a working woman. She has a very, like, virginal face. She's very beautiful. She looks very innocent. But she is a working woman. And the long and short of it is that she goes on this trip with this, like, guy that has been a regular with 3 of his friends who also have their own women. And they're all ditched in this, like, town by these men. And Fantine was, like, genuinely in love with this man, and she's also pregnant. And he just leaves. I don't think he even knows about the kid. So that, that happened. I would like to talk more about Fantine, but, like, we really didn't get to see a lot of her in the last bit that I was reading. Like, a lot of it was focused on, like, the man who sounds like a douche. Like, I know that Fantine could do better, but also I know that she really loved him, and I hate him. So there's that. But yeah, that's what I've read. I'm hoping to read more today. I have to read more today. We'll just see when. It's gonna be kind of a quick update. I read like 80 something pages on Wednesday. I only read, like, I want to say like 30 yesterday. I didn't even look to see where I am in the physical book. I know I've passed the 200 page mark, but yesterday was kind of yesterday was kind of a rough day. I found out that a friend of mine who I'd kind of fallen out of touch with, but, you know, passed away very suddenly. And I'm not going to go into it because it's not my story to tell, and there were other people involved that were harmed and are recovering. And so yeah, so I found that out yesterday. So I pretty much just spent the day just with my support system, pretty much. Like, it was just a series of me, like, bouncing around my friends for comfort. So that was helpful, but it meant that I didn't read a lot. So I'm not really going to go into, well, pretty much where I am right now is that Jean Valjean has recreated himself and is now the mayor of a town. He has met Fantine, and he wants to help get Cosette and bring Cosette to Fantine before Fantine dies. But he finds out that there's another man who, like, resembles him, who sort of has, like, a similar sounding name, is essentially being mistaken for him. And it is possible that this man will go to prison, to the galleys, for the rest of his life, because he's thought to be Jean Valjean. And so the chapter that I read yesterday, which was a very long chapter, was just Jean Valjean sort of, like, processing this and trying to figure out, like, what is he going to do? Is he going to go and, like, correct the situation and reveal that, no, he's Jean Valjean and this other man is only guilty of stealing apples and not all the other things? Or is he not going to do that and focus on, you know, being there for this town and for Fantine? And like, so he's torn in these, like, 2 different directions of, like, what is right. Anyone who's seen the musical knows what he's gonna do. But it was interesting just watching, like, reading that back and forth as he, like, paced his bedroom in the middle of the night. So that's what I read yesterday. That's where I am. I will definitely read more today. So I'm about at the, I would say, 450 mark for Les Mis. I think I'm like 36%. I didn't read much yesterday, which is sort of what got me thinking of like, how can I keep with my posting schedule, but also like give myself a little bit more wiggle room with Les Mis. And I think giving myself 3 weeks is like, that feels better. So yeah, I'm about 36% through, and Valjean has, he's been through so much. He was the mayor of this town, he met Fantine, Fantine died, and then Jean Valjean went and, well, first he went back to prison, and then he escaped. And then he went to get Cosette. And in the midst of that, we got like 50 pages on the Battle of Waterloo, which had happened like, what, 7 years before where we were in the book. And so it was just like, no, it had to happen before that. No, I'm right. Yeah, I'm right. It's so hard. I have so many dates from like 1815 in my head from the Count of Monte Cristo, which I just finished. So yeah, so the Battle of Waterloo took place like maybe like 7 years before where we are in Les Mis, when Jean Valjean is going to go get Cosette from the Thénardiers. And it felt like I knew the Battle of Waterloo was going to be explained. And I knew that it wasn't actually relevant to the plot. But I knew it was going to be there. And so when I got there, I was like, oh, all right, here we are. It felt like Victor Hugo had a special interest area in the Battle of Waterloo and had done a lot of personal research, and he wanted to just share with the audience what he learned and why he thought it was so interesting. And then he realized that he had to link it to the plot of the book because he just wrote like 50 pages on it. And so at the very end, it's revealed that Thénardier was at the Battle of Waterloo and was looting corpses. And that's why it's there. And so it's like, all right, man. I feel like that didn't need to be there. But you do you. That's fine. Now I know more about the Battle of Waterloo. So that was like the one part where I'm like, because even where I am now, where I'm learning about the history of convents, like, that makes more sense because Jean Valjean has Cosette, and Javert has figured out that Jean Valjean, like, is alive because everyone thought he was dead, and that's how he escaped prison the second time. But Javert realizes that he's alive, and he's, like, trying to find him. And so they're, like, at this, like, convent. And before we figure out, like, what happens next, we have to learn about the history of this convent. Of course. So, and it's fine. It's honestly, it's really amusing because I'm just like, great, I get to know all these different things. So, yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I'm just like, I keep getting these random info dumps from Victor Hugo, and I find it very amusing. And I also understand now how they were able to take a 1,200-page book and turn it into like a 2.5-hour musical, because they're just huge chunks that you can just leave out that aren't necessary in a musical. So, yeah. But I just wanted to make sure I filmed an update sort of where I was. And I'm going to get to reading because I only have like 2.5 hours to read before I have to start work. So, and maybe that'll get me like another 50 pages. It's kind of slow going, especially when I'm in the like info dump portions. Once we get to like actual interactions of characters, then it goes a little bit faster. So, I will check in later. Okay. I have a lot to talk about. I think, so the last time that I filmed a clip, I want to say I was in like the mid 400s page-wise. I'm now mid 800, I think. I'm at 72% according to my Kindle. So, a lot has happened. Okay. I think I talked about Waterloo. Did I? I think I did. Waterloo happened. There you go. I think I mentioned this because I think I remember saying that like it felt like Victor Hugo had some like special interest areas that he wanted to share with the audience. Yeah, I think that's something I talked about. That's happened a couple more times. The latest one was about slang and like the development of slang, and I gotta say, while I get it, while I understand, unnecessary. Even more unnecessary than Waterloo, I think. Not gonna lie, sort of skimmed that bit. So if you have read Les Mis and really liked the whole book on slang, very sorry. Let me know if I missed anything important. But, okay, so Jean Valjean now has Cosette. They lived in a convent for a while, and now they live in this like small townhome. And Cosette and Marius saw each other, you know, Marius, or went after a couple years, Cosette is now like 15, I believe, would see Marius around the gardens of Luxembourg, and they fell in love with each other because that's how that happens in classic literature, especially. Let's see. I'm trying to sort of summarize because a lot has happened. I will be filming more as I get closer to the end, but Marius used to live actually where Jean Valjean and Cosette used to live in a tenement, actually, I think in the room that they stayed in, which I thought was really interesting. And next door is the Thénardiers. And so that means, obviously, Mr. and Mrs. Thénardier, as well as Eponine and her sister, whose name I don't remember because she's not in the musical. Because she doesn't really do much. She just sort of whines. Which is understandable. They have a very hard life. But Eponine becomes friends with Marius. Well, I think she would say they're friends. He probably wouldn't. And Marius has conflicting feelings because Thénardier, he knows, is the person who saved his father. And Marius, you know, has come around to sort of like worshipping his father, although he didn't really know him until he had died. But he also has a loyalty to Jean Valjean, who he recognizes as Cosette's father. And there's a scuffle between Thénardier and Valjean. And so Marius is like conflicted, but there's a situation arranged where like he doesn't have to get involved. I felt so stupid the other day because in the first or second volume, when Cosette was still young and was still with the Thénardiers, there is mention of a son. The Thénardiers have a son who is at that time an infant. And I felt so stupid that it took me literally like 50% of the book to realize that that infant is Gavroche. Who is like, we're introduced to as like this scamp around Paris. You know, he lives on the street. He does have a family, which is different from a lot of the other children that live on the street. But he recognizes that his parents like don't love him, and so he only goes to see them like once every couple months, but like there's no like family tie there. So he mainly lives on the street, and it took me so long to realize that Gavroche was a Thénardier. Because there's even mention about how the mom, like, had a son, actually had 3 sons, and in some way got rid of them. Like, Gavroche sort of just, like, bounced. And then the other 2 boys they gave to someone else for like a scam or something. But actually those boys were raised like decently well comparatively. But yeah, there was a lot of talk about how the Madame Thénardier preferred her daughters. And I'm so annoyed that it took me so long to make that connection. But now, where I am in the book, Gavroche actually ran into his brothers, although they don't know they're related, because the person who was watching over them was arrested, and so essentially they're now homeless, and so Gavroche is taking them in and taking care of them. So I thought that was very cute, and I'm very sad because I know that Gavroche is going to die. I know that that's going to happen. Like, I've seen the musical, and I'm really, really sad about it. But I haven't gotten there yet. Where I have gotten, actually, is literally right before the July Revolution starts. So I'm on like the morning of July 5th. So it'll be interesting. And it's so interesting because I have a friend who's read Les Mis, and so we chat about it and where I am in the book. And they mentioned that it's so funny to like read the book, especially after you've seen the musical or the movie or whatever. To like read the book and then realize that the actual like revolution part, very small part of the book. Like, you could say that we're building up to it the whole time, technically, but like, it's a very small part of the book. And they brought it up because Marius has these friends. Like, Marius is obsessive, okay? He becomes obsessive about his dad after his dad dies and finding out everything, and then he becomes obsessive about Napoleon. But then he sees Cosette and he gets obsessive about her, and everything else just disappears, including these friends that he had. So these friends are called the Friends of the ABC, or if I say it correctly, the Friends of the ABC, I think is how you pronounce it. Friends of the People, essentially. And it is, you know, a group of students that are going to be involved in this revolution. And my friend Ellis mentioned, like, it's so funny because, like, in the Les Mis fandom, like, the Friends of the ABC are, you know, people write about them a lot, but they're actually not in the book that much. And so it's just really interesting. They're way more present in the musical, but I know, because I've seen the fandom, I know that the fandom draws a lot from the book, even though they're not in the book nearly as much as they are in the musical. It's so fascinating. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. Things are gonna get hard because, right, like, it's the morning of the revolution, and I know who's gonna die. So I realize this was a very rushed sort of summary of the last 400 pages, and I'm sure I've missed something, and I will try to come back to it if I remember what I've missed. But I will film more now that I'm getting to the tail end. I'm sure I'll have tons to talk about with the actual fight, as well as the development of relationships. So, alright, but I have to go back to work, so I will check in later. I am 86% through. So I will finish it tomorrow. Whew. I don't remember what happened last time I filmed. I do have some thoughts. I know I talked about Gavroche last time, so let's start there. The barricade has gone up. The fights at the barricade have happened. And we we lost a lot of people, including Gavroche. And something I was talking with my friend about, who is also read Les Mis, is that because I'm going into this with a lot of knowledge from the musical, it's been interesting to reflect on the differences, right? Like, in the musical, my favorite character is Eponine, which I don't think is surprising. I think Eponine is a lot of people's favorite character from the musical. However, if I didn't have that, like, exposure, reading the book, Eponine's, like, fine. Like, she's fine. She's just kind of there. And, like, yeah, you can tell she has feelings for Marius. And that, you know, she tries to help him. She's had a hard life. But, like, when she dies, she sacrifices herself for Marius. And it's like, I would say it's a good death, but it didn't, like, make me cry or anything. Not like watching the musical does. So it's just interesting to sort of notice how the musical informs my response or lack of response in the book. Because with acknowledging, like, why Eponine was, like, not my favorite in the book, I didn't dislike her, but just comparatively. But I can say that definitely my favorite character was Gavroche. And when he died, I had to, like, take a break. Like, I didn't cry, because I don't tend to cry while reading. But I had to, like, sort of, like, walk away a little bit, just because it was just so, like, and I knew it was coming. Because Gavroche is just, like, I think the reason I like him so much in the book, and I don't remember how much of this is in the musical, because I've always paid more attention to, like, Eponine, and Gavroche has, like, a fairly small part in the musical compared to some of the other characters. But in the book, he has so much whimsy. Like, he's just, like, there's a revolution happening, or an insurrection, depending on what side you're looking at. And he's, like, going around the streets of Paris just singing. And he believes in the revolution so much, but he's also just, like, he's gonna have a good time. So, I don't know, I just really enjoyed him. And then the revolutionaries were running out of cartridges, out of ammunition, and so he decides to go loot the National Guard members who have died on the other side of the barricade. And he lasts for a long time, and that kind of makes it worse, because I knew it was gonna happen, but I didn't know how. But, like, you start reading it, and he lasts a long time, and he loots all these, like, corpses, and he's just surviving. And he's like dancing around, he's singing, and the bullets can't touch him. And then all of a sudden they do. And it's just a couple sentences at the end of a chapter. And it's just like, I just had to stop for a bit. Like, I got up, I started cleaning. I'm just like, and Chris asked, like, he's like, what's wrong? I'm like, a lot of people just died. Which was accurate, but also it was like, Gavroche was the one that hurt. So yeah, so the barricade happened. And I'm sure I skipped over a big chunk from the last time I talked. But, oh, Marius is suicidal now because he thinks Cosette has left. And even though Jean Valjean showed up at the barricade, Marius still continues to, like, feel suicidal, instead of asking Jean Valjean what the fuck he's doing there. I'm like, my bro, can you, like, use words? Can my camera stop washing me out? So, I gotta say, this is another example of a character I prefer in the musical. Because Marius is so annoying. I think I mentioned last time that he gets very obsessive. And it's not my favorite. I also, like, I knew that the revolutionaries, like, were not a huge part of the book. However, they have been a huge part of what I've read this past weekend. And I have to say, I now understand the part of the Les Mis fandom that is obsessed with, and I'm gonna butcher these names, Angelus? Anhoris? I don't know how to pronounce it. And then Grantaire. I understand that ship now. Because even though like the subtext is there, and it's clearly unrequited, but it's just like that last scene. This is like the one spoiler I don't want to talk about. But that last scene, I immediately, like, after I read that, and like, okay, all the fighting at the barricade is over. I put down my book again. I pulled up my phone. I went to Tumblr. And I went to, what is it, Angleterre, I think, or something, is the ship name. I went to that tag, and I was just looking at fan art. I'm like, I get it. I get it now. We love a good, historical, maybe unrequited love story that is depressing. So yeah, that was really interesting. Just sort of because I'd seen it, because I exist in fandom spaces, so I'd seen that ship before. But I'm like, oh, that's a little random. And then I read the book, and I'm like, that's not random anymore. So that was a good time. I'm now in my most anticipated section, which is the sewer system. Because I knew, right? I knew that Victor Hugo goes off in tangents. He's done several. But now we're in the one that I knew for sure was going to be there because I've heard people talk about it. And it's about the Paris sewer system. And so I'm assuming it's this, is it book? Yeah. Because the way that Les Mis is structured, it's 5 volumes, all of which are broken into books, and then all of which are broken further into chapters. So this one book on my Kindle is like 400 pages, which is not an accurate number. So like probably in the book it's like 20. But I'm assuming this whole book is about the sewer system. The first chapter was about Paris's excrement, which I personally don't think I needed to read about, but I understand why it's there, because they're going into the sewer. And what's in the sewer? Excrement. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm trying to think of any other thoughts that I had about the book. For as long as it is, I am enjoying it. I will say that giving myself a deadline was necessary, because otherwise this would take me forever. But it does mean that I'm not doing anything else. Any free time I have that is not taken up by work, by like meetings, like out of work meetings, requirements like cooking, like, or even social time, like anything that is literally free time, I'm reading. And it's still taking me like, what, 20, by tomorrow it'll be 23 days. So I'm glad I gave myself a deadline, but also I kind of can't wait till I'm done so that I can actually feel productive. I think that's part of like, I've been feeling down the last like week and a half or 2 weeks. And I think one reason is because I'm just not feeling as productive as I usually do, because I haven't done anything. Like, I have so many emails I need to, like, I'll respond to the ones that like need an immediate response, but like ones that don't, of just like, oh, I'm gonna keep this email because it's something that I have to do, but there's not a deadline. I have so many of those. And then I want to spring clean, and then like there's just so many things that I want to do that I haven't. So I'm very much looking forward to, after tomorrow, like getting to do my to-do list. But that's where I'm at. So I will check in tomorrow when I finish the book, because I will finish it tomorrow. So I'll let you know my final thoughts then. I have finished Les Miserables. It took me, what, 23 days? Which, honestly, not bad. Like, I'm pretty proud of that. It did not take me a full month. So, before I get into it, I want to acknowledge that when it came to rating the book, I had to look at it as if I didn't have the context of the musical. Obviously, if you've watched this far, you know that I love the musical. And I liked the book, so I'm just gonna say that right now. But when it came to rating it, I had to take my love of the musical away and look at it as like, what would I rate this book if I was just reading it? I had no other context. So I'm just gonna say what I rated it now. I gave it a 3.5. For a while, I was like, okay, this is a solid, like, 4-star. And then I got to the part where, I'm skipping ahead, but, like, this was the main reason. I got to the part where Jean Valjean tells Marius that he's an ex-convict. And I wanted to punch Marius in the face. Like, quite honestly, I texted my friend Ellis, who has read Les Mis before, and I said exactly that. I'm like, I've reached the point where Jean Valjean has confessed to Marius, and I want to punch him in the face. Because I didn't bring my Kindle with me where I had, like, I was reading so many notes. I was so angry at how Marius responded. And, like, look, I was already not the biggest fan of Marius. He has a very, like, obsessive personality in the book. And he just, like, ditches his friends because he decides that he's in love with this woman he hasn't met. And, like, I'm changing subject. I already wasn't a big fan of Marius. And then this happened. His reaction. Jean Valjean went to the barricade to make sure that Marius lived because he knew that Cosette loved him. He carried this man, who was dead weight at the time because he was unconscious, throughout the sewers of Paris, almost fell into quicksand with him, but refused to give him up, made sure that he was taken to his grandfather so that he could survive. And, like, okay, fine, like, yes, Marius doesn't know about all of that yet. But still, like, for Marius to hear that Jean Valjean was a convict 20 years ago, and for Marius's entire, like, way of viewing him, like, they already didn't have, like, I wouldn't say a good relationship. Like, they were kind of cold to each other. But for Marius to then be like, you are very clearly evil. And, like, there's a line that I highlighted because I'm like, are you serious? Because it was from Marius's perspective, and there was a line where it said that convicts are beyond the bottom rung of society. Like, essentially saying they're not even human. And I was just like, this is the father of the woman that you married. And all it took was one conversation where Marius didn't ask any fucking follow-up questions for him to just be like, oh, you're evil, you're nothing to us, like, sure, you can visit Cosette, but I'm gonna do my damnedest to make sure that Cosette doesn't actually give a shit about you. Like, Marius killed Jean Valjean. That is my stance. Jean Valjean wasted away from grief, and by the time Marius learned information from Thénardier, of all people, and pulled his head out of his ass, it was too late. There was nothing to be done. So, not gonna lie, a big reason for why I rated it a 3.5 instead of a 4 or a 4.5 was because of Marius. Because he was so fucking annoying. And I hated him. I texted Chris after I finished it, Well, while this was happening, I'm like, I hate this character. I know you don't know anything about it, but I hate him. I texted him, I'm like, I want to see the musical now, like, preferably a production. But I want to see the musical again because the musical very clearly fixed all the things that were wrong with the book. Which it pains me to say because, like, I didn't mind the book. I read a lot of, like, older literature. So, like, were some of the tangents unnecessary? Yes. Honestly, the one that I had always heard about was the sewer one, where it's a solid, like, I don't even know, maybe 30 pages about the Paris sewer system. And I had always heard about that and people complaining about it. That one didn't bother me, actually. Like, that one, I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. Like, they're in the sewer system. I should know about it. Waterloo and this weird slang one, those I felt were really unnecessary. But, so, like, even with those, like, special interest areas of Victor Hugo's, like, I still would have given it, like, probably, like, a 4.5. But the characters bother me so much. And I don't know if they bother me so much because I do have experience with the musical, and so obviously the characterization in the musical is pretty different. I feel like the characters in the book still would have bothered me without that context. So, because there is also the Cosette of it all. Because, look, Cosette is treated very much as, like, just a girl who does whatever the men in her life tell her to do. And it was lovely when the man telling her to do things was Jean Valjean very clearly had her best interest at heart and just wanted her to be happy. It got really bothersome when the man in her life was Marius, because Marius is a fucking idiot. And and Cosette's just like, yep, whatever you say because I love you and you're my husband. And even though this man saved me from a horrible situation and has been my father-like figure for 9 years, I'm going to give all of that up because my husband told me to. Like, ugh. Like, I was reading it, and as someone who, like, I didn't grow up with, like, a mom. And I didn't get, like, my mother figure until, like, properly until I was, like, 20. So I have a very close relationship with my dad, and I was reading it, and the idea that Cosette, who has only ever had her dad, or Jean Valjean, who was her dad, and she just abandons him. I was so angry at this stupid fucking couple. And, like, I already, in the musical, like, kind of found Marius and Cosette annoying, because I'm Eponine girly. But, God, they're so much worse in the book. So, it's mainly the characters. The characters really bothered me at the at the end. Oh, I was so angry. And I've already talked about the barricade stuff. So, like, I felt like I was one of the miserables. At the end, I was like, fuck this shit. Would I read it again? No. No, quite honestly. I'm glad that I read it. I'm glad that I have this experience. I'm glad that I read it at the time that I did. Because I feel like I'm older and I can appreciate more of just all the dynamics that were in the book. And yeah, so I wouldn't read it again. I think a 3.5 is pretty solid. I think that's respectful. Respectful. I'm sticky with that word. But yeah. I told Chris that I'm probably gonna make him watch the movie with me this weekend, because even though I do prefer like a stage production, and Chicago actually does have Les Mis coming to Broadway in Chicago for like 10 days, maybe 12 days, the tickets are stupid expensive. Like, the cheapest tickets are $125 for one seat. And, like, I can't do that. I was like, look, if I can find tickets, even if they're in the back row for like $80, not an option. So I'm like, and I told that to Chris. He's like, yeah, I wouldn't be willing to spend that much money, because I told him, I was like, you would come with me, because I'm trying to get him more into musicals. He likes Hamilton, but not really anything else. So yeah, so I'm gonna make him watch the movie with me this weekend, so that I can stop being so angry. It was so good. Literally until the last 10%, which, to be fair, is like, what, 120 pages? The last 120 pages. But it was so good. I really enjoyed it. And then that last 10%, man. So, that's Les Mis. I'm sorry if my viewpoints upset anyone, but they're how I felt. And trust me, you would have gotten a much angrier reaction last night if I had filmed. So I waited for a reason. So, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Leave me a comment. Let me know how you felt about Les Mis, if you've read the book, or if you've seen the production and this was your way of avoiding reading the book, which I also understand. But like the video, subscribe, click the notification bell, and I will talk to you in the next video, which will be a TBR video. But then after that, we'll be back to regular vlogs, which will kind of just be nice. So, bye.